The parties in this case, on one side we have the Department of Commerce, the Census Bureau, and Wilbur Ross, who's the Secretary of Commerce. On the other side, we have a group of states led by New York, several major cities and counties, and a couple of different nonprofits. This case has two different issues. The first issue, broadly, is whether the Constitution or any other law bars the U.S. Secretary of Commerce from adding a question about citizenship to the 2020 census. And then the second question is whether the district court properly allowed the challengers in the case to seek discovery, additional fact-finding, beyond the official administrative record, the record that the Secretary of Commerce relied on when he decided to add the citizenship question to the census. The exact text of the question, the survey that goes to each household would ask about the various members of the household. Is this person a citizen of the United States? And you'd check a box, yes or no. So the origins of the question are really the heart of the lawsuit. The Secretary of Commerce, the Department of Commerce, says that the question came from the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division in particular, which says that it wants the data that it would get from asking this question to better enforce the Federal Voting Rights Act. The challengers say that the decision to include the citizenship question was part of an effort by the Trump administration to discriminate against minorities by leading to an undercount of undocumented immigrants and minorities in general, and that the rationale that the Justice Department wanted the information is simply a pretext. The best argument for the Department of Commerce is that it has very broad discretion when it's deciding how to conduct the census, what questions to include on the census, and that this question or some form of this question has been on the census for many years without incident. Under the Constitution, Congress is actually responsible for conducting the census, but Congress has delegated the responsibility to the Secretary of Commerce in a law called the Census Act. There was a 1996 case that could affect the outcome of this case in the Supreme Court, a case called Wisconsin versus New York that actually involved the enumeration clause. The question before the Supreme Court was whether or not the Department of Commerce and the Census Bureau was required to use a statistical method to correct an undercount in the census, and the Supreme Court concluded that the Census Bureau was not required to use that correction, and more broadly that the Census Bureau and the Department of Commerce have fairly broad discretion in conducting the census. The best argument for New York is probably that the Department of Commerce may well have broad discretion, but that there are, under the Census Act, procedures that the Department of Commerce is supposed to follow, and that it simply hasn't followed them here. The actions of the Secretary of Commerce violated the Administrative Procedure Act in the sense that they were not in accordance with the law under the Administrative Procedure Act, and there were two provisions of the Census Act that they are alleged to have violated. And the first is a requirement that whenever possible, the Secretary of Commerce get information from administrative records that are already available rather than asking direct questions on the census. And the second is a requirement under the Census Act that the subject of different questions on the census be reported to Congress in advance. And they say that the citizenship question wasn't reported to Congress in advance.